Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Andrea Simintov, and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Okay, so we're here together again, another week, another action-filled, painful, exciting, wondrous week has passed. And before we get started, in our romper room moment, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. I want to say, Erev Tov, my gosh, it's so late at night for those listening into the U.S. and Canada. UK is listening in this morning. Boker Tov Eretz Israel. Australia is with us. Germany is listening in. Norway, Argentina, Indonesia. Again, we have Jamaica joining us. I'm liking that a lot. And Nigeria. Okay, so we're all together. We're all together in love. We're all together in wanting for ourselves, for those we love, and for our fellow human being. Today's show, we're going to talk about a lot of things. I'm in a little bit of a Woodstock move, finding the love, finding the pockets, finding the okayness together. We're going to talk a little bit about the horror, the unimaginable horror in Florida, what happened in Miami. And any of you listening in from the States have a thought about it, please enter the chat room. Tell me where you're listening in from. I won't necessarily call you out if you don't want me to, but let me know what you're thinking, your thoughts, and what's going on in your corner of the woods. We're also going to address, the Torah portion of Pinchas, how it applies to us today. Who was Pinchas? Was he a good guy? Was he faulty? Was he flawed? And why was he merited to become a priest? When there are those who, would pick and choose the rules and don't like it. We're going to talk about taking time off, vacationing, even for those of us who are not wealthy, the critical import of finding those pockets of time with which to connect to heaven and to connect ourselves. Or is that oxymoronic? Is it indeed the same thing? My name is Andrea Simintov, and guess what? I'll see you on the other side.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I wanted to just share a couple of thoughts. I kind of intimated that this thing about taking time off and relaxing and getting in touch with ourselves. Sometimes I hear people say, I can't afford to take a vacation. And they're talking about money. I hear other people saying, I can't afford the time to take a vacation. And they're talking about their pressure and the urgency and the import of their lives. And I will protest and I will say to you that a vacation, a soul-satisfying experience can be walking out of the office and finding a tree in the shade and a bench under that tree and letting your mind go to the places that it went to when you were a child and everything was possible and everything was at your feet, and you would indeed live this glorious, wonderful, fame-filled, fortune-filled, nachas-filled life, and suddenly we find ourselves in the rut There are mini vacations. There are things I remember when I was a child, a very young child. I lived in a New York City neighborhood, and I had a friend, my friend Vicky, with whom I'm still actually in touch today, and we would take a can of peas and carrots, and we didn't have pop-off tops in those days. You had to bring the can opener, or we would make 2-cent peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we would walk to a kind of berm on the side of the Belt Parkway. Nothing gets more urban and ugly than the Belt Parkway. And we found there were 2 weeping willow trees. And under those weeping willow trees, we went places. We dreamed. We imagined. It was better than a week in Cancun. It was better than climbing the Himalayas. It was better than sun basking in a Caribbean island. And we learned the art. Yesterday, I went to the beach. I kid you not. I went to the beach in the middle of the day. I spent 1 hour on the beach, couldn't go in the water because of the medusote. Here is your new word, medusa. It is a jellyfish. Oh, one second. I'm going to come back to you. All right. Stay in that reverie mode, boys and girls. We have Larry on the phone. Come on. Larry is brave enough to call. I'm very excited. He's an old friend. Come on, Larry, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am here. How are you tonight?
I'm good. It is, what time? You're calling from Kansas? Am I accurate?
Yes, I'm calling from Kansas, and it's night for me, but not for you. I know that. But, I called to make some speculation and some comments about the horrible tragedy in Florida. But
Please,
you got
Larry.
me on the meditation now. And I think when people go on vacations and they save their money up and go to someplace like Cancun or something like that, they're actually trying to find themselves and get out of the thought rut they're in. But they can sit in the park, like you just said, under a tree, or if they really practice, they can meditate anywhere and go on a very, very good vacation that improves your perspective and makes you enjoy life and appreciate the life you have. And then something like this happens in Florida, and, you lose your perspective for a while, but you have to get it back. So,
Larry, it's very funny. First of all, we're on the
same.
same page. Absolutely on the same page.
I think we're Buddhists at
very
heart or
often
something,
they
aren't we?
take these expensive vacations and you don't come back relaxed.
You have to come back and recover from it.
You got to recover.
Which
You're very
doesn't
nervous
make
about
much
what happened
sense.
to your bank account. And
Yeah.
so it's true. And what you said about Florida. So let me ask you something. I'm sure that the coverage by you, what are some of your thoughts? What do you think about the Israeli team? The Israelis coming in and attempting to be very helpful in this unspeakable situation. What are your thoughts, Larry?
Well, they're so regular about that. I knew they would do it. It was just a matter of, what hour they were going to show up, but they always do, and good on them for doing that. But what really made me wonder about the whole thing is that when I first saw videos of that building going down, it was reminiscent of, the Twin Trade Towers. It didn't look right.
Yeah.
And then when I saw more coverage and footage of the underground parking garage, I saw all those cars that were way out of the way of where the building came down, but they were all in disarray and piled up on each other. And then I started to think. But I stopped thinking because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But then I saw one of the people who escaped from the building, and he said his first awareness of something going on that was wrong, he said he heard a clap of thunder that was the loudest he had ever heard in his life, times 1,000. That does not sound like a building falling down to me. It sounds like a building that just got blown up.
I hear what you're saying, Larry. You know what? I'm going to make an executive decision here, and I'm curious if you agree with me. Look, this story is not, unfortunately, this story is going to continue to be written. All right?
Yeah.
I think the things that you're touching upon definitely are going to be expounded by others far more articulate than us, not you, Larry, but me. And I think in the meantime, the fact of the matter is it has whether it imploded, whether it collapsed from the outside in, from the inside out. I think right now, again, they're going to take a look at your theory. I think you may have something there. Let's find out. But let's pray.
Well, then I also heard and put it together that it happened, one day after U.S. forces had bombed some targets in Syria?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what, Larry? I hope we'll stay in touch. Stay in touch. And I'll be the first one to tell you.
Oh, I wish you still had the old chat room, but that fool that came on and destroyed it, I guess, destroyed it permanently. So, anyway.
Oh, yeah? I'm in the chat room
thanks
now.
For taking the call. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Larry, have a Shabbat Shalom and stay listening in. And again, you know what? I hope you're wrong. I fear you could be right.
I do too.
Yeah. Sometimes being wrong is really a gift.
But the question about meditation and the way you took that mental vacation with your friend under the weeping willows, you're dead on with that. All of us can afford to do that. It's good for us, too.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, and stay in touch.
Certainly.
Okay?
I will.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Kol hakavod, all due respect. Larry, he's a thinker. He listens. He wasn't dogmatic. He opened up a channel of thought. Halavai. I hope he's wrong. But you know what? This story is not done being written. But, before I go back into my whole reverie of my beach and stuff, I do want to say to you, we're very proud when we see the Israelis, and I saw a lot of, the only criticism I have seen about the Israeli team coming in is that they have hope. They're being documented even today, I think 6 days after this collapse, and they're being documented as saying, our job is we're not here looking for bodies, we're here looking for people. Even as of this morning, late night in Florida, they're looking for people. You know what? We don't have to call doomsday. I'm so excited that at least this little breath of humanity says we have hope. Because if that little hope is enough to keep one family member from sinking into possible, probable despair, where is the crime? And you know what? Just as I said to Larry, I hope that his premise is wrong. Oh, wow. Let us hope that these Israeli heroes are right. And in the meantime, we will continue to pray for the victims and for the mishpachot, the families that are indeed. We keep thinking in this world, we keep experiencing this, nothing could be worse than this, nothing could be worse than this, nothing could be worse than this. And guess what? We keep getting a little bit of a whammy, a little bit of a surprise. So in a separation, I do want to tell you something. Thank you, Larry, for commenting. I learned then that you can take a pocket and in that pocket heal, in that pocket soar, in that pocket dream. We have lost the ability to dream and sink into ourselves and connect to our magic. And I have to tell you, we couldn't go in the water yesterday, my friend and myself, because the jellyfish were just crazed. So she fell asleep in the shade and I couldn't fall asleep. I didn't have anything to read. And I went for a walk and I picked up shells. And I remembered a book that I read. And as I did this, I realized we're 1 hour on the beach. I came home changed. Some of us don't have the luxury of getting to the beach. Some of us can merely make it to a bench. But if we can make it to the bench and just connect to our breath, remember, every time you breathe, you are celebrating. Oh my gosh, that's a gift. I just got $1 million. I just got 1 million brachot. Whatever it is. One thing I do want to tell you, very funny. I had a, do people really want to make aliyah moment? I was in the parking lot. The ocean was beautiful. The color really was azure. It was a teal, magnificent blue. And in front of my eyes, in the parking lot, I saw a man. He looked to the right. He looked to the left. He went to see if anybody was looking at him. I was staring right at him. It was like a car accident that you couldn't avoid. and he stripped down naked to change his clothing. My friends, I'm not a pervert. I couldn't look away. So I did what any self-respecting modern person in 2021 does. I took a picture and I sent it to friends and said, this is why people can't make Aliyah. Anyway, that was my humor of the day. My name is Andrea Simantov. Let's laugh and love together on the other side.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simantov, pull up a chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So listen, if you can't, Larry got me thinking, if you can't reach me via the chat room, sometimes people just don't want to sign into it. It's, you have to have some kind of connection to social media. But please feel free, drop me a note at Andrea at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And I will be, I love getting notes. I love being in contact, and particularly interested in our friends who don't live in Israel, what your connection is to Israel, what your connection is to the passions and the things that excite you on this wonderful station. So again, I just love this, that, part of the Israeli team said there is always hope. And they're trained for this. They are absolutely trained for this. So in keeping with today's theme of hope and passion and connectedness, even in the smallest way, I saw a picture this week. Somebody posted on Facebook. It was a picture. I'm trying to think of the clearest way to say this. It was children. And it looked like children. They were clearly impoverished. It was clearly some kind of primitive village. I would venture to say that this was, if your imagination will go along with mine, I imagine that it was somewhere in Central or in South America, just from the appearance of the children, wearing clothing that you could see was their clothing. It wasn't, what will I take out of the closet today? It was the boy with the blue pants, the girl with the pink shirt. And the children were standing together. In my day, in my mother's day, that she would refer to them as urchins. So these young children are standing together, and one boy was holding up a battered flip-flop, the little rubber shoes, the beach shoes, and it was a battered flip-flop, and he was holding it up in his left hand, and the children were all posing and smiling into the flip-flop as though it were a camera. They had obviously seen people taking selfies, and they used that flip-flop to pretend that they were having their picture taken as a group. And I saw this, and I thought, what has happened to us? That our imagination, a friend said to me the other day that she couldn't imagine what she would say to her 5-year-old self if she had her 5-year-old self sitting on her knee. And I thought to myself, I spend my days in delusion. I have a lot of things to say to my 5-year-old self. And that's the difference. Can we remember the child that dreamed, the child that laughed, the child that used to take a shoe and pretend it was a hammer, or if it was a boy, take a Barbie doll and pretend it was a hammer and hit a block. I just kept seeing the smiles on these children's faces, and I remember imagining taking an old can and pretending it was a vase where we put flowers in. And I thought to myself, so many of us are blessed with abundance. We're drowning in material. And yet, in our desire, in our race, in our craze to have more, achieve more, mean more, we forget what we do have. That flip-flop, pretending to be a cell phone with a camera. You know, life is so short. Believe me, the older I get, the clearer I am that even with God's 120, there ain't that much time left. So I say, what is the panacea? What is the answer? What is the trick? Forgive. Forgive quickly. Believe slowly. Laugh hard. Laugh loud. Every day, find 3 things to laugh at. The man changing his clothing in the parking lot because he didn't think anyone was looking, or he didn't think it mattered. It was a riot. Somebody acting silly in the supermarket, thinking no one's there. There's so much to laugh at, so much to weep. And there's one other thing that I will say. The idea of giving, you know what? There's a lot of things we can get wrong. I recently printed out, I'm not sharing any of the secrets I have. I recently printed out, I'm working on a self-improvement. There's an area of my life that I am not personally satisfied with, an area of my life that causes me great discomfort. I don't do shame, but I do discomfort. And I printed out the 12 steps. I never really read the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I took the 12 steps and I rewrote it to fit my particular challenge. And I read this every single day. And one thing I want to tell you that I've learned from my little 12-step foray is that when you give, and you give a little more, and you give until your head and your heart are swimming in the glorious God-given human experience, you know what? You'll never get it wrong. You can't screw it up. You will be a rock star and you will have arrived. And it doesn't matter which dreams came to fruition and which fell like firecracker duds. You can always get it right with that act of giving. This whole crazy obsession that we can't wrest it from our children until we wrest it from ourselves. This obsession, life's not fair. I'm going into injustice mode. It blurs our understanding that we are truly created, B'Tselem Elokim, in God's image. And then that work of repairing the world is not outside of ourselves. It starts with us. It starts with us in partnership. All of us. Whether it's a plane load of Israelis listening with stethoscopes for the sound of a mule, not an M-U-L-E, an M-E-W-L, or somebody feeding the neighborhood cats, or I must tell you, my machatenister, my son-in-law's mother, it never dawned on me that when you leave a restaurant, you take your leftovers. I know all about taking leftovers, okay? I'm Jewish. But that you take your leftovers and find someone to give them to. And I discovered that in South Africa, that's a very common thing. When people go out to dinner and they take their leftovers, they take the breads from the table, the rolls, whatever it is, and they walk out. And unfortunately, there's so many people around waiting for some kind of assistance, and they just hand it out. What a small thing. What a small thing that changes the world. Tselem Elokim, in complete partnership. It is very, very exciting to be part of this. Okay, came across an article, very interesting. What I found more interesting than the article were the nasty comments afterwards. And the article starts out and it says, it was actually from the New York Times, but I found it in a Jewish magazine as well. And it said, the rabbi said it was okay. A Hasidic mother of 10 becomes a doctor. And it was how Hasidic, I love this term, the ultra-Orthodox. There's no ultra-Orthodox. There's observant and not observant. But anyway, a identifiably ultra-Orthodox mother of 10 children, she navigated the kind of strict cultural norms to become one of, not the only, but one of very, very few Hasidic female doctors in this country. Her name is Alexandra Friedman. Anyway, she was incredible. And the rabbi said yes. And people took such great umbrage in the comment, well, what, she had to ask the rabbi? Let me tell you something, people. There's a track record in Orthodox Judaism, a track record that spans thousands and thousands of years of a life that works. Is it imperfect? Well, yeah. Anybody listening to this show know of some movement, some lifestyle that offers perfection? 10 children, and she was smart. She is smart. And she always had a feeling that she could give more. Not enough to have 10 children who are going to be taxpayers and life changers and world improvers. She could give more. And according to the precepts of her lifestyle, she checked with the Rebbe. And after a lot of back and forth, and he's going to give up here and give up there. And her husband has a minimum wage job. You hear this? That he was working days. He quit his job, took a night job so he could take over a lot of the childcare during the day. She delivered during her medical school studies. Her children decorated her medical books with decals and little pictures. She is now, I think, a practicing family physician. And what was so sweet, what I found fabulous and others found ugly, was she needed to learn to drive. And in her particular Hasidic sect, women generally do not drive. So her husband would drive her to the edge of town. She would then take the car to where she needed to go. Okay, what medical conference, what medical practice, what she needed to do. And he got back. This is partnership. This is making it work. And I'm sorry. There are some who adhere to that wonderful, what a successful movement, that movement of feminism that has left so many women gaping and childless and lost and partnerless. So you can call me whatever you want. What I think the holiest part of this story is the partnership between Dr. Friedman and God, and Dr. Friedman and her husband, and indeed Dr. Friedman with the rest of the world. May God bless us with more people that are God-centered and humanity-driven. My name is Andrea Simintov. I'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, pull up a chair, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'd like to iterate and say, if you'd like to drop me a note, give me some of your thoughts, something you'd like me to maybe talk about on the program. Happy to hear from you. Andrea at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And I must say, this show goes on live, and not all the shows on the station are live. Most of I don't know most. Nobody ever, polled me. But I think that a lot of these are done on pre-taped podcasts, which are nice And I probably should admire it and say they're probably a lot more polished than this show. But to me, I just made a decision. To me, there's something very exciting and very on the edge, sort of like standing at the edge of that high dive in your community pool and taking that chance. And I feel it makes me feel just a little bit more connected in real time. It's very nice to know that you're out there. So before we talk about the Parsha, the Torah portion, and by the way, I've been chastised by the management at this station. I have to tell you, and they're not wrong. Very often I will use Hebrew terminology, Hebrew words, and I just make the assumption because I speak a language as many Anglos in this country do. We speak a new language. It's not Hebrew, it's not English, it's called Hebrewish. And we use a lot of words that are in Hebrew, but we don't really know we're speaking Hebrew anymore. They're just words. It's like the word chutzpah. There's not a person listening to this show today that doesn't know what chutzpah is. Well, chutzpah is not English, but I think you can find it in the Oxford English Dictionary right now. So you're getting the vibe. Anyway, nice note from an LA physician, a very fine doctor, actual Iranian, Iranian born. And he writes that there's a lesson he learns from patients every day. And he says, you only realize how insignificant most of your worries are once you have a health problem. The healthy person has so many wishes, but the sick person has only one wish. It's a good thing to read this every morning. This is my Andrea aside. That's a nice thing to think about every morning, to put our lives in perspective and to help develop gratitude. Because I got to tell you, it's that gratitude thing that's the ticket. It's the ticket to wipe away the blues. Imagine a healthy person. You can toss out your laundry list. I want, I wish, I dream. A sick person, only one desire. Very nice. Okie doke. So here we go. We're at Pinchas. So last week, if you remember, and if you don't remember, download the podcast. We spoke last week about how Balak, who was the king of Moab, he hired the great prophet, and indeed we say the great prophet, Bilam, great but deeply flawed prophet, to cure the wandering nation of Israel. So what does he do instead of cursing them? To curse them. Not cure, curse them. Got that? So what is he curing them of? And to bless. So he ends up blessing them instead of cursing them. So in this week's portion, it's like a continuation, even though the Torah is not a serial, and it's not a history book. We continue with the story of the women of Midian and Moab, who were they were able to succeed in bringing down the nation of Israel, where Bilam failed. They enticed the men of Israel to assimilate. And by the way, if you're looking for a show that's politically correct, a show that is woke, a show that is feminist-centric, shut off your computer. Okay, so in the beginning of this week, the Torah tells us about the act and reward of Pinchas. It states, and this is a direct Torah quote, Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, removed anger from upon Bnei Yisrael. Therefore, I am giving him the covenant of peace, of shalom. So Rabbi Mordechai Katz, I don't know if you remember, just to very quickly synopsis, what does Pinchas do? He sees an act of absolute, overt nudity. The general Zimri was acknowledged to be one of Israel's finest generals, acting, let your pornographic minds take you where it needs to, acting lecherously with Cosbi Batsur, she was a princess of Midian. And what does Pinchas do? There had been warnings, there had been, Jewish fatwas, and he takes his sword and he puts it through the two of them, stabs them both to death in one fell swoop. So Rabbi Mordechai Katz, he questions why Pinchas is rewarded for such a blatant transgression of God's laws. Murder. In full daylight, he murdered them. It was a very overt act. The sexual act as well. There was nothing even remotely pretending to be modest about it. If anything at all, he should have been rebuked. He could have been punished for acting in such a manner. And to take it even a step further, the Talmud Yerushalmi maintains that both Moshe and the elders, they were very upset with Pinchas. And had it not been for God's intervention, one of the elders, we call them Skenim, they would have actually pressured for his excommunication. So it's important to note that Pinchas was not even made a priest until he killed Zimri. So why was he rewarded? There's the question. And why this specific reward of his descendants to retain this kahuna, this priesthood, as chosen by Hashem? And the reason is, there was nothing personal about what he did and how he acted. He acted totally for the honor of God. We call it l'shem shamayim, and not for any personal benefit or gain. He saw that Bnei Yisrael were viewing this immoral act of Zimri, and what happened? They did nothing about it. Nothing to stop it. To Pinchas, this showed a complete, a flagrant, I was going to say fragrant, I'm really tired, I'm 2 cups of coffee down, a flagrant disregard of Hashem's law, and indeed, an absence of ahava, of love, and of yirat shamayim, fear of heaven. Therefore, it was necessary for him to, quote, act swiftly, decisively, uncompromisingly. And in the end, he ended this desecration, this chilul. Had Pinchas not killed those two, Zimri and Cosby, it's likely that many people would have tried to find excuses and loopholes in the halacha, the Jewish law, to defend these transgressions. You know, once a process of dumbing it down, watering it, diluting law, diluting morality, the effects become disastrous. A classic example, and I'm going to say it, you're going to hear it here. A classic example can be seen in other Jewish movements other than clear halacha, law-driven Jewish observance. You know, once you make Judaism a religion of, well, we don't do this, but we do this. I'll take 1 from column A and 2 from column B. You know what happens? The entire law becomes altered. And not only the positive mitzvos, we end up the negative ones. Everything becomes null and void. It becomes Jewish instead of Judaism. The actions of Pinchas in this week's portion demonstrate a resolute, a steadfast, a zealous approach of maintaining the sanctity of God's laws. As a hero? Yeah, he's tainted. According to Rabbi Beryl Wine, he says that the tribes of Israel, especially the tribe of Shimon, they complained that someone who is a descendant of one who fattened calves for paganism and dares kill a head of a tribe in Israel should not be entitled to these honors. And what does Hashem say? Hashem comes to Pinchas' defense and grants him the gift of the priesthood. We're not going to talk now about the genealogy because time is going on, but peace. All right, so let me just say this. The word shalom, it marks a covenant of peace that was granted by Pinchas, granted to Pinchas by God. But this is what I need to share for you. The word shalom in the Torah, as bestowed upon Pinchas, the letter vav in the word shalom, it's split, it's cracked. It's not a full blessing. There is a flaw. It's diminished. Our rabbis taught us that because his heroics did indeed involve violence and the taking of human life, even though it was just, even though it was holy, still it is flawed. Okay. There's no argument among any of us who abhor violence at all costs. There's no such thing as a justifiable homicide as far as so many are concerned. Human life is precious, and even the most evil people have to be protective so that no harm should come to them. In theory, pacifism is a very noble idea, but the contentious and dangerous world that human beings are forced to live in is a recipe for disaster. And very often, tyranny and evil thrives in the name of pacifism, in the name of political correctness, in the name of people doing their own thing. You know, I'd like to end this show today with the advice of King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, who says, "The words of the wise are spoken in quiet." I would like to suggest that even when we see things that rub us the wrong way, even though we see things that do not necessarily jive with our hearts and our way of thinking, take a moment, sit under the willow trees, and breathe in and out. It's all a gift. Shabbat Shalom.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.